Walt, I don't know if I like this or not. You took a page out of my playbook and you went and put on your field inspector hat and you were out there in California uncovering all sorts of great stuff. While you were out there, Wayve announced a deal with Stellantis and the foreign autonomy desk stayed hot. Let's start with Inspector Walt doing field work. What did you uncover in Silicon Valley, Walt?
Well, first and foremost, the death of San Francisco is greatly exaggerated. We spent some time in downtown, obviously most of the time in the valley. San Francisco is much changed. So congrats there. I don't know if our friends in Texas would reconsider moving back to San Fran, because there's other issues that obviously California has, but really positive experience. And obviously still a ton of great energy and optimism within the tech folks that are there. Unfortunately, this means a shit ton of traffic that we had to deal with. Sorry, Mom. And thank you for all the industry listeners who reached out and we were able to kind of meet for the first time. So that was great to meet some new people within the industry. But yeah, Grayson, I did feel like you. At one point, we were on whatever road that is that connects San Fran. I forget the names. Always in an Uber or Waymo. And I saw this gigantic Waymo depot. I posted it on Twitter, now known as X. Had some Ohi's in there, the Geelys that were there. I saw one on the highway as well. What did you think of that sighting? I was channeling your inner Clouseau on that one.
I want to know where your hat was. I mean, if you're going to go do the field work and find depots, you have to have a hat. So where was the hat?
The hat was not there. That was one of the most massive and busier ones that I think I've seen, and actually, upon observation, looked like the most effective in terms. Other ones weren't operating that efficiently. That one looked super efficient. I don't even know who owned it. We got to do some more work on that. We'll get back to our listeners when we have some more of those details. We also met, obviously, with a bunch of executives across the industry, Aurora, Uber, whatever, rode in, multiple cars, Nuro, WeRide, Wayve, obviously Waymo. All of these were solid trips. I'm going to prefer to withhold ultimate judgment on these. I mean, again, you and I think, have ridden in more of these than most people. I was joking with Brandon on the Light Shed podcast. Even he now has been in a lot of these autonomous cars more than most people that I think cover, or at least claim to cover the space. But again, I'm going to withhold judgment because, a lot of times you visit the companies, they put you in the cars, you're kind of on a set route. I'd rather just be able to pick at will my location that I want to go. Because I've had, experiences in the past, whether it's AV Ride or May Mobility, where you have kind of the set ride from HQ, and then, there's some differences when it's actually deployed out in the field and you're picking a location. With that said, again, all of these rides, were very high quality. There were, some short stopping on one of them or two of them. They all people were complaining maybe that they were following the speed limit. I think that's kind of early stages, unlike Waymo, which was obviously more aggressive. But I think, generally a very positive experience. And again, just once again, Grayson, increases my optimism about with the opportunity for this industry and the number of competitors that are still in the mix to deliver product.
WeRide. That's interesting. What did you learn at WeRide? Because globally, they're expanding pretty quickly, and you had an opportunity to ride in the car and meet with the team. What did you learn at WeRide?
Well, thank you for noticing that one. I was kind of whipping through a lot of the companies because we saw so many companies. Yes, good job. Clappy hat for you. For not that I was trying to sneak it through there. There was no one in the driver's seat. So I was in a WeRide, and there was literally no one in the driver's seat. We also got a great update from their team on the tech evolution, the market opportunity, kind of how they view the different competing technological solutions out there, and a very thoughtful, I think, approach, to the global market, and clearly or not clearly, but like I said before, a smooth ride. Again, I'm going to caveat that by saying, it's their selected route. It's not necessarily something that we picked. That's fine. I could fly to Riyadh and try it there, I suppose.
Well, at some point, there will be a UAE, Saudi Arabia trip coming up, so you can tag along on that because we've experienced this in person. You also went and met with Neuro. Neuro has a new CFO. Mike, congratulations on the role, sir. What did you learn at Neuro? Because Neuro seems to be coming along really strong these days.
Good hire for Neuro. Also an Eagles fan, so that's a positive. I feel bad for him out there in the land of the Niners and having to deal with those fans. Again, good ride. I will say that we in that ride we drove out of the lot as opposed to basically like hitting a button. I think that's kind of with the process of how their AI is working, where they're putting in these kind of drop-off and pickups. Drop-off and pickups are still certainly a challenge. It's the topic that came up at every one of our meetings. I think also, having to deal with Lucid is an incremental, process, right? When you change cars, like, whether I was in we had a Toyota and there was a Lexus there that we were in. Lucid's obviously giving me a much more comfortable car to Lexus. Sorry to Lexus owners, but it's just not a great car. But I think like the Lucid thing is going to take time. We weren't able to get into a Lucid car, and I think this is a challenge that any company, and something we should think about when we talk about some of these startups, and like how many OEMs can you truly partner with? You need to dedicate resources to get a market commercial, to get 100 cars commercial in a market, to prove out to your partners, to the market, to investors, to get forward. So I think it's kind of a critical decision, the partners that you choose. In the case of Lucid, like they're needing to a certain extent Uber's help in terms of financing, and I don't know, it's not, I don't think ideal, but I think Neuro certainly has got other opportunities, and I think we'll continue to develop with Neuro. The other interesting thing about Neuro, I think they have actually an opportunity with their tech when they launch and they go commercial at the end of the year, to not be like AV Ride and some of these others where there's a safety driver there. I think when they launch commercially, I think they're gearing up to have a driver out in that situation. We'll see. I mean, I don't know. No promises there. That's just my kind of sense on the development path of that tech, and I think they've got some other interesting things going on there.
When I was with Neuro a few weeks ago in Vegas and saw their test track, they have a facility to test drive routes. So they have all the technology means, the testing means, but that's Neuro. I got the big question for you. So you mentioned Mike's a Philly fan for the Eagles. Why do we not have Walt's Eagles Appreciation Club? All the folks that you meet with can become Walt's Eagle Fan Club. When is that coming? That's what I want to know. Not driver out, Walt's Eagles Fan Club. When's it coming?
I don't know. I think that's a great question. I maybe for my picture back here, I need to start putting some Eagles stuff there. But the Eagles fan base can be can also drive there. For every Eagles fan club, there's an Eagles hater club. That's for sure. Maybe 10. Look, the bigger takeaway I think from this trip though was the use of real data. Like Wayve, you saw like fleets of these Mach-E's going out to collect data. Interesting, by the way, which we'll get into a little later, in that it looked like they were training without LiDAR. I mean, with LiDAR to basically help like a camera-based, what appeared to be like a camera-based solution. You see these things obviously on the road as they kind of exit where they're at. But collecting data is important. And I actually, Grayson, this age-old question of like, why won't Elon use LiDAR? And I think I got finally one of the more interesting takes on this, which was, well, if all of his data is from camera only. So like if he decided, hey, we're going to slap in a $500 LiDAR into our windshield, would that whole process have to restart because they don't have the training data that includes the LiDAR? That has nothing to do with all the other stuff that we've talked about before. But I mean, that's that could be a hurdle and a reason why they would resist and continue to try and get the camera only solution to work rather than just like saying, doing a why not and sticking to LiDAR. Now, look, I know for those that follow Tesla closely, which so do we, the explanation that they've given is, the excess data and the conflicting data between the LiDAR and the camera, can cause additional latency. And let me assure my listeners that the multiple engineers that we talk to, I constantly push back on those that, that have the LiDAR solutions when they say, no, it can handle. I'm like, okay, but if this, that, and the other thing will it add latency? And then there's like this admission of like, well, yeah, I guess there is latency, but is it really that much that it's going to make a difference? That I'm saying like, well, yeah, maybe it does make a difference if you're hitting a kid at 6 miles an hour versus 1 mile an hour, maybe that fraction of a millisecond. So I think, the jury to me, I think is still out on the original excuse, or not the original, maybe the second excuse that Tesla has provided on this kind of LiDAR decision, which is, again, having these multi-sensor inputs. Obviously, most of these people are like, oh, it's going to be much safer to have LiDAR. And then we get into the debate of like, okay, does it have to be 100 times safer, or can it be 50 times safer? Like at the end of the day, like you get into safe cars sometimes and less safe cars on other times. There was to me, my takeaway, I didn't hear anything from the smartest people in this industry that has convinced me that definitively, like, you have to have LiDAR in order for this solution to work. But obviously, getting data is still fundamental. Even going to Autonomy 2.0, having training data, whether it's real use or the simulated data, which a lot of people were talking about as well, is still a critical part of this development process.
Funny you bring up data. Uber's back on X. Multiple people, as a matter of fact, talking about AV labs and the data that they're looking to generate. I'm uncertain. It seems that I'm just uncertain about the whole thing that they're building with AV labs. To me, I've said it, they should vertically integrate. AV labs seems like they got 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and now they're talking about data. And an engineers that I've known for years said not all data is created equal. So I'm uncertain here.
Yeah, well, I hear you, but I mean, the one takeaway was again, about getting data. And obviously everyone talks up simulated data, which is basically some verification of what Raquel said at Wabi, plus is selling data, plus being a trucking autonomy company. I will say this though, and by the way, and Uber is investing in their own fleet of cars, and I think they're going to be paying customers in there, but primarily to generate a data set. But what's also interesting about this data, like I said earlier before with Lucid and Neuro, is like you have to retrain on whatever the new car is. Like if a car is a different size and these sensors are in different locations, that's going to require its own incremental training. That's where I think a lot of this simulated data comes into play. So I think there's certainly value that Uber is going to provide for its autonomous partners. There's dollars that can be made there, as Plus, I think, has demonstrated in the millions, if tens of millions, I think, of dollars. I think your buddies over at Implied Intuition are creating, some of this data as well. So I think, there's value there, and I think Uber wants to help their partners. Because obviously the ones generating the data out there are Waymo and Tesla, which don't seem to have the greatest relationship with Uber or its partners.
I would say there is value in data. I think the value is being overstated because I don't understand truly how transferable the data is from one partner to another, as you highlighted, and how much of that data is actually noise versus valuable training data. We don't know. It's commendable. I just don't know.
One more thing before we move on to some of the news that hit Waymo this week that we should talk about it, which is, the potential size of this ADAS market. Again, this is not what we want, right? Grayson, you and I want level 4, autonomous robotaxis, ultimately like private ownership, which I guess is level 5, 6, 7. I don't know. I don't keep up with all these levels. Being able to go to sleep in your car, whatever level that is. This can generate revenue, right? This is a sizable market that OEMs want. Survivability is key for these startups. I'm already worried about someone like, Lucid, and like, how does that hamper, Neuro, or like, are they going to be a strong enough partner in the interim? Like, so ADAS, I think, can provide an opportunity. So I know that there's a seeming pivot at Wayve, which we've, I would say criticized in the past, but I think, is embracing the ADAS opportunity a positive or negative in your mind?
I think it's an extreme positive. I actually did an interview for a book today on this, and I believe that all of this pivot and growth of ADAS is being driven by the global consumer. The global consumer is seeing what you can do with FSD. And this is personal, not large data set. I've known some individuals that have bought a Tesla because of FSD, and I have a feeling, and I assume that global OEMs do not want to be left behind, and they want their own product to compete with Tesla FSD. So I think if you want to call it the L2 plus, or add on as many pluses as you want, or Roman numerals, anything you want, I think it's a growth market that the OEMs are going to invest in. You're seeing GM invest in it with Super Cruise, and I think at the end of the day, that's being driven by consumer demand.
Yeah, I mean, the demand. I think people would criticize, like, why is Tesla's FSD demand or penetration not like 50%? But if you think about the size of the market, if you even hit what Tesla with very little advertising and really only getting super good in the last year or so, that's still a decent number and a revenue opportunity for these OEMs. And again, something that the autonomy guys can use to kind of bootstrap them, because, as we progress here, we've talked about before, like, there's going to be consolidation. We want them all to win. We will call it out when someone's kind of moving ahead versus falling behind on autonomy markets. I also don't think that we've seen the end of the big dollars from Uber. Like, I once had this kind of thought that, like, okay, what if Nuro delivers 150 cars to the market in the middle of next year, and AV Ride and others were still like struggling with the driver behind the wheel? Like, would they get cut off from Uber and obviously not have the ability to fund? I think Uber probably wants to extend the competitive landscape there for some period of time. So I don't think we've seen the end of Uber's dollars there. And obviously, like, on the flip side, as this gets successful, there's not that market to finance these cars. So there's going to be a lot of dollars spent, I think in the billions, right, to purchase the cars as things ramp. Again, we're more bullish than I think most on seeing that ramp, but it's clearly, in my mind at least, not the end. Now, Uber will argue that, like, look, they're still going to stick to their mantra of half of our free cash flow, which is a $10 billion-ish number, is still going to be used for share repurchase. That still leaves a lot of dollars to be invested in autonomy.
Leaves a lot of dollars. If you look at the numbers that GM publicly released from their autonomy day, the projections they have for their L2 plus business, it's in the billions of dollars. So it's a significant opportunity. And I notice a trend in Ubers that I've taken where the drivers are using FSD for the rides and engaged. And they're actively talking about it. And as it truly relates to Uber's autonomy business, I still don't think they're signaling to the market where they're truly going to go at the end of the day.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, this market's wide open. I still think there's a good possibility that Uber ends up owning one of them. And there still could be others that they partner with that would need the demand that their platform can deliver.
I've said this before, and I'll say it again. At some point, I truly believe that Uber will rebuild ATG, which is their Advanced Technologies Group, with an acquisition. I think at this time, though, obviously it's going to be different because you have different leadership, different management. I think you'll have more discipline. Who that's going to be, I'm not going to make an assumption there, but I do believe at some point Uber will vertically integrate, as you said. And then I'm also going to look for Uber to potentially vertically integrate the fleet management side of it as well. To have a fully integrated, if you want to call it, Robotaxi in a box. That would be very interesting if Uber ever did go down that strategy, and I think at some point they might.
First of all, I agree with you that they should. This is all like the proper choice of words. I think they are far afield from going down that route. You never know. Like, one guy could emerge, and take the leadership. It's fragmented now. No one really, I don't think, does a good job quite yet. We'll obviously be tracking Avis, Hertz, the Uber partners, and other independents that are emerging. Speaking of Waymo, we had some news from them this week. Grayson, what's up with that?
Highway access was turned off, and Waymo is going to issue, according to official accounts and post, an update for flooding because another vehicle unfortunately ran into or autonomously drove into a flooded road.
But the highways, what does the highways have to do with the flooding, or are these two separate issues?
It appears, we do not have a public statement, we do not have a NHTSA report. It appears that they're not correlated. However, we do not know. And I will highlight, additionally, Waymo had a human driver in London that drove through a crime scene, and that individual was fired, according to the Financial Times. So Waymo's had a interesting week, to say the least.
I mean, to me, this is all noise. Look, bottom line, Waymo is the undisputed autonomy leader globally, in this country, everywhere, period, end of story. I mean, and my rides in the car are getting even more aggressive, more human-like. They're even developing the UI. A lot of times these companies will develop the tech. I'm still getting into cars and it's like, iPads that are kind of, stapled on, blocking the airflow that's in there. Ooh, right, in my settings, the temperature is exactly what's in my settings in the app beforehand. The seat is set exactly the way I want it. It's clean. I know there's people out there that have suggested, because maybe there's a one-off like soda bottle in there. I was in cars that had 80,000 miles, 100,000 miles, and these things were, a quality, clean experience, right? So, I mean, undisputed leader. So this stuff to me is noise unless there's like major issues. I was personally, by the way, to our Waymo listeners, I was disappointed. You have not turned my highway on. And at the airport, that rental car location didn't work. I guess I should have tried the Hyatt in order to try and get in and out of the airport, but I was kind of in a rush and not wanting to deal with those extra walks. Sorry, I didn't have the same Inspector Clouseau diligence that our friend Grayson here does.
Wait a second. Did I hear that right? You did not want to walk. That sounds familiar. Who says that all the time?
It was because of it was a time crunch, not because of of any laziness. By the way, the other thing the other takeaway from a lot of these conversations is, and I think this is kind of logical when you think about it, the value of Waymo using their limited growth of supply to get a beachhead in existing markets and establish themselves as like, hey, I'm the first guy in, I developed the rules. So like slap a couple hundred cars in a market, you're the person that's there first. You design the local rules the way you want them to, right? And then keep expanding markets before you worry about necessarily scaling up. At some point though, you get that critical mass and then all of a sudden 300 cars in a market turn into 1,000. Or 1,500. And obviously there's other issues that they're working on in terms of service depots to do that. So it's kind of this like, this spring that's getting kind of like wound up, right, in all these different markets. And then all of a sudden Hyundai is going to come in with the lower price cars with a cheaper sensor stack. And then bam, like there's going to be all these cars in the market. And those shares that some people have alleged are moderating, we'll see what happens then.
You're right. And I want to reemphasize what you said. Waymo is the global leader in autonomy. It is an autonomous vehicle that is not supervised. They are driver out in 11 cities. They're testing around the world. They're testing in Tokyo. They're testing it in London. They are the undisputed leader. Yes. Are you going to have incidents as you build and scale new technologies? Yes, but they're admitting it. They're putting pause. They're fixing the issue, and they're moving on at the end of the day. And if you want to sit here and somebody wants to shoot bow and arrows at me, how many times have humans driven into a flooded road? Thousands? Millions?
Well, you should only look at my Twitter account at Walt Lightshed. And I tweeted a picture of a young lady who was in a bus in New York City, and she was trying to hop out of the bus, and the water just swooped her away down the street into the street drain. Obviously humans do this as well. So if this is our biggest problems with AVs, I think we're going to do okay.
We're going to do okay, and they're going to scale, which brings us to London. We had news from London today, May 22nd. The government of London has said now operators can apply to run taxi, bus, and private hire-style self-driving vehicles across Great Britain. The door is open. You can apply. It is a very positive step for the UK, and it is a positive step globally for autonomy as it scales.
Yeah, I can't wait. We should get back there. Now that I've been in a Wayve in California, I'd like to get in a Wayve on the streets of London. My understanding is the same software load wherever you are. But good for London. I don't know, is this in any way related to some of the political changes that are occurring in the UK overall, do you think?
This was scheduled. I am watching, obviously we had the elections, and if you look at the polling data, I got to give a shout out to Daily Mail. They're a great outlet. if you look at some of the data the Daily Mail's reporting, and at some point, I'm not saying when, it all appears the prime minister is going to resign, and then you will have national elections at some point. And if the polling holds, I believe that you could potentially see an acceleration of the adoption of autonomy in the UK if the polling data holds, because there is one politician who I will remain anonymous, who is getting very vocal in the Financial Times about trying to stop this technology, specifically in London, in Great Britain. But it is not going to happen because the UK government is publicly touting that by allowing this technology to prosper and deploy in the UK, it will generate £3.7 billion a year in economic data, economic advantage by 2040. That is very, very positive for the UK. And if you look at economic data, the UK is not exactly thriving at the moment.
Well, good for them. And, we'll close out our UK section by congratulating fans of Arsenal for finally getting over the hump and winning the Premier League.
That's football. See, well, I said the right word, football. And I do want to highlight in the official government press release from the UK government, Wayve, Waymo, and Uber all quoted, very positive sign, as commercial rides are scheduled to begin at the end of the year. Now, let's jump across the pond. So that was one side of the pond. Now we're back on the other side of the pond where football is throwing a pigskin, not kicking. I almost fell out of my chair. The United States Congress, bipartisan, I know that's a dirty word, introduced the Build America 250 Act, which is the highway reauthorization bill. So the highways can be paved and no potholes when you go down to Philadelphia and you don't drive, you supervise. Preemption for autonomous trucks. If the bill is passed and signed into law as it is, autonomous trucks will have preemption, allowing them to go over state lines, which would be really, really great for the industry.
I mean, I've been saying this in the last couple of weeks. It feels like this whole industry in autonomous trucking is at an inflection point. You've got, Aurora, Bot Auto, others like, taking their driver out, announcing new customers. It's kind of happening, right? And in the case of Aurora, really stepping up their, the implementation of some of these initial trucks to kind of prime the pump until you really get that equipment fully scaled out in, at some point, I think next year and into 28, where we're going to have thousands of trucks on the road at a time when it's needed, right? And obviously there's a lot of things going on in the trucking industry, Supreme Court rulings, CDL licenses, that, the need for truckers has never been more important. I was thinking I saw on someone putting out like how well JB Hunt stock has done, and just given the demand for some of these services. So good timing, and thankfully, hopefully, effective in preempting some of the craziness that we're seeing from some politicians, in terms of autonomy and data centers, and I can go on and on. Just a lot of the fear mongering that we've seen in stuff like fracking and nuclear and whatever.
Yeah, I will say to the team at JB Hunt, they listen. They do a phenomenal job. Shelley does a great job running that company. It's extremely well managed from what Mr. Hunt started. It's a really great company. And I do want to highlight one thing in the bill, that the bill will authorize $30 million a year through 2031 for workforce development, which is really a positive as this technology goes through. So I wanted to highlight that as well.
Yeah, I mean, $30 million is nice. Irrelevant relative to the larger issue here is just, cleaning up the regulations so we can get these companies going. Now, look, if there's still states that for whatever reason stop it, there are plenty of states in the Southeast that I think there's plenty of opportunity for these guys to execute. So, but good to see some action on the federal level. So we look for more of that as we approach robotaxis as well. What's next?
Just to clarify that one point, this bill will give preemption, so it would override this states.
No, I know that, Grayson, but I am always skeptical of these states. I hear you. I still, as they say, believe it when I see it. I'm always worried. I'm right. This is constantly the battle between, states and national, but I appreciate that.
Always worry, but if and when the president does sign the bill in its current form, they get preempted, and it's a good thing for the U.S. economy. End of discussion. Wayve did a deal with Stellantis, L2++ supervised. So thank you to Stellantis and the Wayve comms teams for actually using the word supervised when there's somebody behind the wheel. Point-to-point destination. What do you make of this deal? Because earlier in the year, Stellantis did a press release with NVIDIA and Uber saying that they're going to put robo-taxis in Europe. Haven't heard much about. What do you make of this deal?
I mean, I think it kind of talks back or echoes back to what I was saying earlier about ADAS, because I think it's supervised. I mean, level 2++ is always going to be supervised, right? So I think this is a, revenue. Look, Wayve is certainly well capitalized, has very strong investors, but everyone's got to come up with some revenue. Like, this is to a certain extent about survivability to getting to the next level. So I think that's positive. I don't know too much about Stellantis. What are your views on them as an OEM type of partner?
They're trying to make a comeback. I don't know any other way to say that Stellantis is trying to make a comeback. They have one of the most iconic American brands in Jeep. And I think that the company has not had a good run, I'll say, for the last decade or so. And the new management, new leadership team is trying to turn the company around. And I wish them well with it, and I hope they succeed.
I mean, ideally, you don't want to be partnered with someone trying to make a comeback. You want to be partnered with someone that can crank out a ton of cars at a low price.
They can crank out a lot of cars, but they are trying to make a comeback. And not only did they do a deal with Wayve this week, they also did a deal with Applied Intuition for software. So hopefully that can accelerate the comeback.
I did notice, by the way, it was interesting, and I saw those press releases hit when I was at Wayve. Applied Intuition, I think the headquarters is like literally right across the street, is it not?
It is. Let's go to the foreign autonomy desk here. No surprise, China's back in the news. WeRide pulled the driver for the shuttle at the Zurich airport, so perhaps we've got to take a shuttle ride or a shuttle ride across the pond to Zurich to experience this new driver out bus.
I mean, Switzerland is one of my favorite places, so I'm all for. Not necessarily Zurich, but you can get out of Zurich pretty quickly. But yeah, that'd be a great trip to do. Let's do that one. What else we have in the foreign autonomy desk?
We have XPeng introduced their vision-only GX Robotaxi off the line. They are going to start commercial testing in China later this year. Again, another sign that China continues to push forward on Robotaxi.
Yeah, a little different, right? Because, vision only, obviously. I don't know, is that for level 4 or level 2?
That is for a true level 4 Robotaxi system. In March, XPeng opened a Robotaxi division, so they're going to own and operate this asset according to the latest press release out of the company.
So basically, we're saying Tesla is not the only company in the world doing a vision-only Robotaxi, right? Interesting, given my earlier comments. I'd also just kind of shout out, WeRide is while they don't have as many cars as Waymo does out there, they do have a lot of markets, and that's obviously very important. And look, drive around, whether a robobus or a car, that's the real deal. I think they actually still have like a safety person on that robobus for whatever reason. I think I saw that in the press release, but WeRide kind of nipping at the heels in terms of having cars that are truly drive around.
Well, when we take the trip to Zurich, I'm going to put on the inspector hat to see you. Hello, are you a supervisor? Hello, are you a supervisor? I'm going to ask a lot of questions.
You better brush up on your Chinese. What do we have next week?
Well, that's why I have MetaClass. Before we get to next week, a huge shout out to Matt Cresswell out of London, sir. Thanks for sending Walt and I the great photo of the Waymo next to the iconic red bus.
Actually, you know what, Grayson, what I just realized? Hold on for a second. I think the Eagles schedule, we're going to cross all this. You have the fan club from London, right? We have, perhaps the Philly fan club. I believe the Eagles might be playing in London this year against the Jaguars at Tottenham Stadium. I don't know if Tottenham's going to remain in the Premier League or not, but maybe that's the opportunity to hit London and maybe pop up to Zurich to check out the WeRide. This could be a good road trip, I think.
I like it. Autonomy Markets going to go on the road. Walt's going to have a fan club. I'm going to sit there and clap for all of his fans. Clap for Walt! Clap for Walt! I don't think I want to wear this to the Eagles game in London. I don't think that's a good idea. I've seen what you guys do to sidewalk bots.
You don't want a lobster hat among the Eagles fan. Maybe like two cheesesteak buns like clapping together.
I won't even ask you what if Jim's is the best one in Philly. I'm not going there. So what do we have for next week?
Pony AI, which is the other one of the other autonomous companies, reporting earnings. I'm going to see our friend Don Burnett, CEO at Kodiak. Got a bunch of investor conferences. So yeah, it'll be another busy week. We haven't heard much from Tesla recently, so I don't know. I'm going to predict maybe we hear something from Tesla for next week. We'll see.
It's going to go all quiet on the Western Front to news on the Western Front.
By the way, the other thing I'm going to be spending most of the weekend on, Grayson, and maybe this is why we haven't heard much from Tesla, is the S1 for SpaceX just dropped. And that is quite a page turner for those that are, I think we have very tech savvy listeners. At a minimum, you can email me or text me for the link. I can send you the link. Just read those intros on SpaceX. I think you'll find it very interesting in terms of SpaceX's approach to the market.
Walt's got homework, and I've got a closing. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is field trips. Walt, until next week.